Hi, welcome to Movies Moment. Today we're going to explain a movie called Love and Monsters. Spoilers ahead. Subscribe if you like this and catch us on the next one. Take care.
When an asteroid called Agatha 616 came hurtling towards Earth, humanity banded together to launch countless missiles to destroy it. However, although the plan to destroy the asteroid worked, the chemical compounds present in these rockets reached the atmosphere and changed the DNA of thousands of creatures, which turned into man-eating monsters. Thanks to the emergence of these genetically modified animals, the human population was practically wiped out and 95% of the population ceased to exist in about a year. Those who luckily managed to survive are hiding in shelters, caves and bunkers all over the planet. For the past 7 years, Joel has been living in an underground shelter with a group of people. The survivors are divided into various roles to try to keep the shelter running, and Joel is one of those responsible for the kitchen. Besides him, there are also people who farm and go out to hunt for food on the surface. Of all the people who live there, Joel is one of the only singles, and this makes him miss Amy, his girlfriend who is living in another colony. One day, the shelter is invaded and the young man takes the weapons so that the hunters can fight off the threat. Despite always volunteering to go on missions with them, Joel has never managed to convince the members of the group that he is strong and skilled enough to deal with those monsters, because he is completely terrified every time he comes across one of those creatures. However, when he learns that one of his friends has been captured, Joel doesn't think twice before grabbing a crossbow and going after the group. As he approaches the beast, the young man sees Connor being devoured and becomes paralyzed with fear, missing the opportunity to shoot the mutant ant. He is about to be devoured when Tim approaches and lops off the creature's head with a sword. 7 years ago, Joel and Amy were in the car together when the asteroid alert was issued. The couple were completely in love, and, since then, the young man has never been able to forget his first great love. When homesickness begins to torment him, Joel uses the radio to contact Unit 3022 to talk to Amy. After contacting numerous colonies, he finally managed to find her, and, about a year ago, the couple started talking on the radio. After telling us about his heroic deeds, the young man says that he misses his girlfriend very much and reveals that he writes letters to her all the time. Upon hearing this, Amy reveals that she would love to know what is written in those letters, and Joel offers to read them. At that moment, the connection between the two colonies is interrupted and the young man can no longer talk to his girlfriend. The day the monsters started appearing, Amy took Joel home and gave her lucky charm to her boyfriend. Before leaving, the girl gave Joel one last hug and then went home to meet her mother. That was the last time they saw each other. That night, while everyone in the shelter is trying to figure out how the ant managed to break in, Joel reveals that he is planning to go to Amy's colony, 84 miles away. Upon hearing this, Ray says that it will take at least 7 days to get there, and Ava reveals that armed and trained hunters would be lucky to last 5 days on the surface. Even so, Joel remains determined to go there, as he is willing to do whatever it takes to find the person he loves. After saying goodbye to his friends, Joel leaves the bunker and, for the first time in 7 years, he comes into contact with sunlight. Looking around, the young man realizes that there are no monsters around, so he can relax while breathing in the fresh air. After checking the map, Joel begins his journey and, after a few minutes of walking, he ends up in the middle of a forest. Suddenly, the young man starts hearing strange noises and decides to hide in an abandoned house. However, it's not long before he finds a monster hiding inside the fridge and runs out into the garden. When he gets there, Joel comes across a lake, and out of it suddenly pop 2 eyes. Soon after, a giant frog emerges from the water and tries to capture him with its retractable tongue. But Joel manages to dodge the attack and sees a dog barking to protect him. When the toad finally manages to capture the young man, the dog bites the creature's tongue and manages to free him. Immediately, Joel runs away from the monster and is chased, but Boy guides him to his hiding place and they manage to escape. At this point, the young man realizes that the dog lives alone in a bus, where his former guardian used to live before she was devoured. After discovering the dog's name and learning a little about its history, Joel sympathizes with the pain of the animal, which has lost the only person it loved. As it is getting dark, the young man decides to stay in the trailer and rest to continue his journey the next morning. At dawn, Joel finishes the drawing of Boy fighting the giant toad and says goodbye to the dog before leaving. However, when the young man leaves the trailer, the dog goes after him and Joel gets a new adventure partner. The only item Boy wants to take on the trip is the dress of his former mistress, so he puts the garment in his backpack. The pair then walk for several miles, and, the longer they spend together, the closer they become. One day, while walking absent-mindedly, Joel falls into a hole full of bones and has to find a way out. But before he could climb the walls, giant worms started attacking him and he had to use pieces of bone to defend himself. Just then, a man called Clyde appears and throws a rope to pull him back to the surface. Minnow then throws an explosive into the hole and destroys all those monsters. After introducing his dog to Clyde and the girl, Joel decides to follow them, as he realizes that his chances of survival will increase if he is by their side. Arriving on a mountain, Minnow helps Joel train his crossbow skills while he tells the story of how he lost her father. That same day, Clyde lost his son, so the two decided to team up to try and survive. When they realize they're being followed by an eater, the trio decide to continue their journey and Joel panics when he realizes there's a monster after him. At that moment, Clyde orders the young man to remove his shirt and puts the garment in the snail's shell so that it spreads Joel's scent throughout the forest. Discovering that there are also harmless monsters, the young man is impressed and Clyde reveals that the creature has just saved their lives, as the smell of the shirt will throw the eater off. That night, Joel shows his new friend his drawing book and reveals that he is cataloging all the monsters he meets along the way in an attempt to discover their main weaknesses. After dinner, the group continues their journey and, throughout the time Joel spends with Clyde and Minnow, they teach him countless lessons about how to survive in that post-apocalyptic world. Over time, the young man becomes an excellent marksman until, finally, the dreaded day arrives when the group has to split up. While Clyde and Minnow go to the mountains to try their luck in one of the shelters there, Joel goes to the coast to find Amy. During the farewell, Clyde hands the young man a grenade and advises him to use it only in an emergency. Seeing the pair leaving, Boy also runs to say goodbye and continues following Joel on his journey, as there are still another 30 miles of walking ahead. The next day, while crossing the forest, the dog hears a noise and hides. Not understanding what's going on, Joel tries to persuade him to come out, but he soon comes across an insect crawling out of the ground. He immediately grabs his crossbow, but can't shoot and ends up being hit by a blow that knocks him away. Then he sees the toy duck where Boy is hiding being destroyed and realizes that if he does nothing, the dog will be eliminated before his eyes, just as his parents were. To prevent this from happening, the young man gets up and starts shooting. Thanks to Minnow's training, he manages to hit his target and eliminates the creature before it can reach him. Joel then checks that his companion is okay and is relieved to realize that the dog made it out unharmed. At dusk, the pair are surprised by a storm and have to take shelter in a house. While waiting for the rain to clear, Joel meets a robot called Mavis. The machine had its legs ripped off by a monster years ago, so it crawled into that shelter to protect itself and save energy until it was found. At this point, Mavis reveals that she has enough battery power to stay on for only 50 minutes, but when she finds out that Joel needs a power source to make his radio work, the robot offers to help him. After connecting the cable, Joel manages to contact Amy and the young woman is relieved to know that her boyfriend is alive. Looking at the map, the young man reveals that he is only 9 miles away from the shelter and says that he will soon reach the beach. Excited by this news, Amy reveals that some survivors appeared in her colony a few days ago and said they would rescue them. After hearing this, the radio's battery is interrupted to preserve Mavis' last 15 minutes of energy. For the next 15 minutes, Joel talks to the robot and gets emotional when Mavis searches her database for photos of the young man's family. At that moment, Joel has the chance to say his last words to his mother and then he observes the flying jellyfish that are roaming the city. Shortly afterwards, Mavis shuts down and, after a night's rest, the young man continues his walk, hoping to reach his destination by nightfall. Once again, however, he is surprised by the sudden arrival of a monster who lives underground and, after distracting him with a toy, Joel flees with his dog. However, during the escape, the young man stumbles and ends up falling, so Boy returns to help him and they both hide in the trunk of a tree. Realizing that the mutant worm is approaching, the pair wait in silence until it moves away and returns to the earth. When the monster leaves, Boy spots his former guardian's dress being blown away and jumps into the water to get it back. At this point, the creature ends up being drawn back, so to save his dog, Joel takes the grenade he got from Clyde and throws it into the monster's mouth. During the explosion, the young man jumps into the water and manages to swim to shore, but ends up being attacked by countless leeches. Furious, he rips the monster out of his body and takes his dissatisfaction out on the dog, blaming it for what happened. Realizing that Joel is angry at him for risking his life to get the dress back, Boy gets upset and decides to leave. So the young man has no choice but to continue his journey alone, but he soon realizes that there is something wrong with his body and faints from the poison injected by the leeches. At that moment, he spots a fern and remembers Clyde saying that those plants have powerful antidotes against stings. After eating some leaves, John starts to feel better and tries to continue walking, but soon has to stop again to rest. Luckily, he is found by Amy and the young woman helps him up. Relieved, Joel kisses his girlfriend and then faints. Hours later, The young man wakes up in the shelter and Amy is there to welcome him, but soon has to leave to help solve a leak problem. As he walks through the bunker, Joel realizes that most of the people who live there are senior citizens and is impressed when he comes across the beach, as he hadn't remembered how beautiful the sea is. Just then, the crew of the yacht show up and Amy introduces Joel as her friend to Captain Brooks Wilkinson, a former member of the Australian Navy. Realizing that Amy no longer has any romantic feelings for him, Joel asks to speak to the young woman in private and discovers that she lost her husband the previous year, shortly before they started talking on the radio. Frustrated, he reveals that he's feeling useless because he thought that Amy would still be in love with him and that the couple could live a happy future together. He then asks for forgiveness for not having told her that he would find her and realizes what a big mistake he has made by leaving the shelter behind, along with all his friends. After hearing this, Amy invites him to join Brooks's crew on the yacht, as she knows her group won't survive much longer in that shelter. Although the place is beautiful and provides all the necessary supplies, it is not safe and can be invaded by monsters at any time. Still unsure of what to do, Joel decides to get to know those people before making a decision and, upon hearing Brooks's stories, he realizes that he won't be useful in that colony. That night, the young man borrows a radio to get in touch with his friends, at which point Elderly shows up to deliver a snack sent by the captain. After a few minutes of trying to communicate with his friends, Joel decides to give up because he hasn't gotten any answers. Looking at the map he got from Karen, the young man notices something he's never seen before. On the back of that sheet, he finds some notes written by his friends and, at that moment, Joel manages to get in touch with Ray. When he discovers that his friend is alive, the man is overjoyed and shares the news with all the other residents of the colony. After recounting some details of his adventure, Joel asks how things are at the shelter and discovers that there have been several break-ins in recent days. According to Ray, they won't be able to stay there for long and are planning to leave soon. Just then, the connection is cut and Joel can't get any more information. Worried about his friends, the young man decides to go back to the shelter, as he feels guilty for having left them behind. While gathering his things, he spots some purple fruit along with the snack Brooks sent and remembers making a few notes about them in his notebook. At this point, Joel realizes that the captain is deliberately poisoning the residents of the shelter and runs to the beach to try to warn them. When he gets there, he finds everyone having a good time and calls Amy over for a chat. However, he realizes that the young woman is completely drunk, having drunk the beer brewed by Brooks and his crew. Even so, Joel tries to convince her that they need to get everyone out of there. The young man believes that the captain didn't go there to save them, but to eliminate everyone. While he tries to convince Amy that Brooks is a threat, the residents of the shelter begin to faint and Joel is attacked by Dana. At dawn, the young man wakes up and realizes that he is tied to a metal structure alongside Amy and all the residents of the colony. Suddenly, the captain approaches and orders Dana to destroy the radio tower to prevent Joel or anyone else from contacting other colonies for help. At this point, the villagers realize that they have been duped, because Brooks never planned to rescue them. The truth is that the man and his crew are looters and have stopped there to steal supplies in order to sail to the next defenseless colony they find along the coast. As if being a thief wasn't bad enough, Brooks reveals that the whole world is running out of fossil fuels, so he has had to improvise to get his yacht moving. According to the man, Rocco found a special fuel source that weighs 10 tons and is chained to the yacht. The creature, which is actually a sea monster, is asleep, but will soon wake up hungry and come to the beach to feed. After breaking the terrible news, the captain and his team move away so as not to fall prey to the monster and everyone panics when they see the crustacean approaching. When she realizes that her family is in danger, Amy manages to break her bonds to free herself and, soon after, helps Joel to get free. The woman then asks him to lure the crab away while she goes after the people who tricked her. At that moment, Amy uses a metal plate as a shield to get closer and attack Rocco, but ends up fainting after being knocked down. Seeing the monster approaching, Joel takes a large metal skewer and pierces the crab's throat, knocking it away. As the creature tries to get up, the young man prepares to deliver the final blow, but ends up being attacked by one of the animal's legs. After the attack, Joel loses consciousness and Amy gets up to face Dana in a duel. While the two women are fighting, the captain uses the chains to help the crab get up and the animal destroys everything in its path. When he hears the old people screaming in despair, Joel wakes up and manages to stand up, only to find the monster walking towards him. The young man is about to be devoured when he sees Boy approaching and running towards him. After hugging his friend, the dog starts barking at the creature and Brooks orders Dana to shoot him. Hearing this, Amy tries to stop her and deflects the attack, causing the monster to be hit by the shot. With a piece of wood, the young woman strikes her opponent and manages to knock her down, but is taken by surprise by Brooks, who sneaks up and wipes out his opponent with a single blow. At this point, the captain and his crew take a small boat to return to the yacht and try to escape, but they are followed by the crab. Worried about Amy, Joel asks his dog to run to her and help her up while he tries to get rid of that monster. During the battle, he realizes that the currents attached to the crustacean's body are also energy conductors that Brooks uses to electrocute him. So, instead of attacking the animal, Joel decides to bet on a different strategy. When he is captured by the creature, he takes the cannon and shoots the chains to free it. When it realizes that it is free, the crab releases its prey and returns to the water. However, before returning to live peacefully in the ocean, the monster goes after revenge and swims to the yacht to eliminate the people who imprisoned it. After eliminating Dana and Rocco, the animal goes after Brooks and devours the captain while he is still alive. Finally, it destroys the yacht and returns home after sinking the vessel. That afternoon, Joel helps Amy take the elderly back to the shelter and look after the injured. After finishing the job, he says goodbye to the young woman and reveals that he needs to get back to his colony to make sure his friends are okay. His plan consists of rescuing his friends and taking them to the shelter in the mountains where Clyde and Minnow are. At that moment, Amy hugs her ex-boyfriend and thanks him for coming to meet her, because if he hadn't been there, everyone would have been eliminated that day. Before leaving, Joel returns the lucky charm Amy gave him 7 years ago in his notebook, where he wrote down all the survival lessons he learned during his journey. Finally, the couple kiss and Amy says she'll meet Joel soon. 7 days after starting their journey home, Joel and Boy make it to the shelter and the young man is relieved to discover that his friends are still alive. After a short rest, Joel returns to the surface with the mission of guiding his group to the shelter in the mountains and transmits a radio message to all the other colonies in an attempt to inspire people to explore the surface in search of a better life, instead of spending their entire lives hidden underground. Inspired by this message, many survivors mobilized to reach the mountains, among them Amy and all the elderly people who lived with her in the shelter.